This is unacceptable. I am breaking the law here.
Hey everybody, and thank you for watching another video. My name is Murge, and welcome to the Breaking Bad What If series that I call the Heisenverse, a series where I make a change somewhere in the Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul timeline and see how that one change ripples throughout the entire universe. And in this video, we conclude the What If Mike Killed Tuco storyline, and if you haven't seen part 1 yet, the link will be right here. And just as a quick recap, there's basically just one Salamanca alive at this point who could actually do business, and Crazy 8 is dead. And with those kind of odds, you would think it's a pretty cut and dry story. But to quote a line from Mike Ehrmantraut,
"Whatever happens next, it's not gonna go down the way you think it is."
But if you're the kind of person that I think you are, you would leave a like on this video. And don't forget to hit the little bell icon so you can stay up to date with the latest episodes. Now, let's get into it.
We cook more tomorrow. Meantime, I know just the guy to talk to.
While reaching out to find a buyer for the new product, Jesse gets word from Combo that Emilio's out on bail, and he heads over to his house to let him check out the new crystal. But as soon as he gets there, Emilio immediately goes to attack him, thinking that Jesse was the one who got him locked up. So to avoid a potential beating, Jesse tells him holding a baggie of meth, "Emilio, wait, I'm here to bring you into this new operation, look! And Emilio says, pressing Jesse against the speakers, "What operation, fool? Where'd you get this?" "I can take you there! Jesse says, nearly being choked by Emilio, and the two would take a drive out to the desert where Emilio basically holds Jesse gunpoint the entire way there. But over at the desert location, Walter sits inside the RV waiting for Jesse to begin their cook. And after about 20 minutes, he hears the sound of music blasting coming his way, causing him to step out wearing nothing but an apron in his underwear, assuming that it's Jesse. But to his surprise, he sees not only Jesse, but also a familiar face that he's seen a few days ago during his ride along with Hank. And before Jesse couldn't even get a word in, Emilio gets out of the car recognizing Walter, and he thinks that Jesse is the one who set him up, saying, "I knew you were working with the feds." But Jesse's able to get out the car and make a run for it. But he doesn't get far before tripping, allowing for Emilio to catch up and once again hold him at gunpoint. And right as he's about to pull the trigger, Walter says, "No, wait, please, I'm not with the DEA, I swear to you. And I can teach you the recipe. That's why you're here, right? I can teach you the recipe and all you have to do is just let us both go." Emilio considers Walter's offer and agrees to it as he kicks Jesse while he's down and knocking him unconscious before he makes his way to Walter inside the RV. And as he begins to cook, Walter tells Emilio to put the cigarette out. But not wanting to take orders from anybody, he would just say, "Hey, don't worry about me, just cook, got it?" But Walter tells him, "What you're smoking is going to mess up the chemical process and ruin the entire batch." And Emilio takes one more drag from the cigarette before blowing smoke in Walter's face, then throwing it out the window. And as Walter nervously reaches for the phosphorus powder, he slowly takes the lid off and hesitates for just a second, having Emilio say, "Come on man, I ain't got all day." And Walter would then quickly dump the powder into the boiling mixture, causing a little explosion that knocks Emilio to the ground and fills the entire RV with phosphorus gas. And he's able to get out and press his body against the RV door, sealing Emilio inside until he passes out from the gas. And before he can even catch a breath, the cigarette that Emilio threw out the window has started a fire that's spreading quickly. And thinking on his feet, he straps a respirator on himself and Jesse and drives away from the area. But not being able to see through the mask and the lab equipment sliding on the floor of the RV, Walter accidentally drives into a ditch. And hearing sirens not too far away, he decides to record a confession for his family before he gets ready for a shootout that never happens. And once Jesse regains consciousness, the two focus their attention on the RV and how they're going to deal with Emilio, who luckily for them was killed by the gas, but there's still a matter of disposing his body that they have to worry about. Over at Jesse's house, with only one body that they have to get rid of, there's no need to flip a coin, but Walter underestimates Jesse's stupidity when it comes to the whole bathtub thing. So after getting themselves cleaned up and flushing the rest of Emilio, Walter is seemingly done with this line of business. But a few days later, Jesse shows up on Walter's doorstep to give him the rest of the money that they made from their first batch. And with this just coming from one cook, although it's not a lot of money, Walter sees the earning potential and decides to get back to cooking. But not wanting to get involved with another Emilio so soon, they keep their operation small, having Jesse move a pound 1/10 at a time. But after a week, the money's just not coming in fast enough to justify the risk that they're taking. So to speed things up, they decide to create a network bringing in Combo, Skinny Pete, and Badger to move the product faster. And for about a month, they make pretty good money, but they also get on the radar of the DEA, not only for finding the respirator out in the desert, but also for the new blue meth that's out in the streets. And when Badger gets arrested for said blue meth, it puts the entire operation at risk, forcing them to enlist the help of criminal lawyer Saul Goodman. But when offering a $10,000 bribe doesn't work, they kidnap Saul and bring him out to the desert to renegotiate and work out a deal to get Badger out that doesn't bring attention from the DEA. And when Saul figures out that he's actually speaking with the Heisenverse, he's very vocal about being a part of their operation. And to prove his capabilities, he takes on the task of getting Badger out of jail, with a substantial fee of course. Saul returns home where Kim is waiting for him, and he comes in excited to tell her about his new client that he has, but he leaves out some crucial details saying, "Hey, so I'm gonna be busy for the next day or two getting things squared away with my new client. I just wanted to get some things before I head back to the office." And Kim is a little confused saying, "Okay, but Jimmy, what new client?" "Oh, it's some guy named Mayhew. I think Peter Mayhew, and his nephew was just picked up for possession and the guy's freaking out, and he's willing to pay top dollar for me to get him out ASAP," Saul explains. And when he goes to get the things that he came for, Kim takes notice of how dirty Saul's pants were when he came home. I mean, after all, he was kneeling down in the desert. And once Saul was ready to leave again, Kim says while sitting down on the couch, "Jimmy, did you fall or something? Why are your pants dirty?" And thinking on his feet, he responds looking down at his pants saying, "Oh, this? Yeah, I thought I hit something on my way here and I kneeled down to see if it was under my car, but hey, false alarm," he says, giving her a kiss before leaving out the door. And Kim can't put her finger on it, but she knows that Jimmy's not telling her the truth. But she also knows the kind of clientele that he has. And if we're being honest, at this point, which is basically midway through season 2, it's no secret that Saul Goodman has a reputation of being the kind of lawyer that guilty people hire. And she's already come to terms with who her husband is, but she also thinks that if he was in over his head, he'd come to her about it. So for now, she lets him do his thing until he gives her a reason to worry, and she gets back to her pro bono work. We pick up the next day at the chicken farm where Gus is having a meeting with Joaquin Salamanca, who's been working in the background keeping the Salamanca name alive by using a chemist to cook high purity meth and bring in more money for the cartel. And with Fring's lab not quite up and running just yet, this meeting is about the new blue meth that's been out on the streets and selling in their territory, having Joaquin ask, "It seems like every day I'm hearing more and more about this blue meth, and it's been about 2 months since our last meeting. Do you have a name yet?" And Gus responds saying, "Yes, Heisenverse. I have my people looking into him, but haven't had an opportunity to set a meeting. There is no need for a meeting, Gustavo. I want that product off my streets, and if his dealers won't give him up, kill them. Send a message. Nobody sells on Salamanca territory." Joaquin says, sounding like his cousins before him, because I like to imagine that he's always felt that he's had to prove himself. And if this Heisenberg is selling in his territory, that means he's taken away from the Salamancas. But Gus, knowing the hot-headed nature of his young colleague, simply agrees, and thus concluding the meeting. And minutes later, Mike enters the room giving him the news that the lawyer wants to arrange a meeting with, you guessed it, Heisenberg. And thinking that he could be an asset to his operation, Gus agrees to the meeting to see what he can offer. Picking up a few hours earlier with Saul, Walter, and Jesse at his office, after proving himself by getting Badger off, Saul knows the gold mine that they're sitting on, and he wants to talk growth, and not just any kind of growth, mass production. And he just so happens to know a guy, well, he knows a guy that knows a guy that knows a guy. And from this moment on, everything basically remains the same up until Walter's first cook with Gail in the super lab. So Combo still dies, Jane still has her overdose, and Jesse goes out on his own and operates from the RV after he gets out of rehab. But let's catch you up on what's been going on with Hank and the DEA, who for the most part haven't had a real lead since what happened with Badger. And because Walter never had his fugue state, Jesse was never a person of interest in the investigation. All they know is that there's an RV involved, but that's not enough to get any real traction on the case. But the work that Hank's been doing overall is still impressive, so much so that he's actually being considered for a position in El Paso. And with no real motive to stay behind, because he's not really getting anywhere with the Heisenberg case, Hank decides to take the position, and by the end of the week, both him and Marie are headed to Texas, saving Jesse from a Hank Schrader beatdown and still allowing for him to keep the RV, for now. And as for the White family, Skylar did figure out about Walter's other job, and when sleeping with Ted didn't get Walter out of the house, she chose to hire an attorney to discuss further options as to what she should do, and that attorney's name? Kim Wexler. And after being fully informed of her husband's drug activity, Kim explained to Skylar, "Okay, Mrs. White, I'm not traditionally a divorce attorney, but given your current circumstances, this is my legal opinion. For the sake of you and your children, you have to get out of that environment as soon as you can," she says, looking at Holly as she continues. "Now, I'm no stranger to, let's call it an exciting relationship, but if you're not careful, anything that he's charged with, you can be charged with as well, and potentially leaving your children as property of the state." And although Skylar is made fully aware of the risk, she ultimately decides not to go through with it, but thanks Kim for her time. But before she goes, Kim hands her 2 business cards telling her, "I completely understand your decision and I'm not judging you at all, but if you ever need to talk, give me a call. And if something were to happen with your husband, give this number a call and tell him that Kim sent you," she says, gesturing to the Better Call Saul business card. Over at the super lab with Gail and Walter, business is good for the new duo, and it even seems like the beginning of a great friendship. But just below the surface, Walter is low-key annoyed at the fact that Gail is just as smart as him, and he purposely sabotages a batch to discredit Gail and have him replaced with Jesse.
Not what I said. I said 85, not 75, not 95. This is chemistry. Degrees matter.
But right now, even though he's not making as much money as Walter with his operation, Jesse, Badger, and Skinny Pete still manage to pull in a decent amount of profit by selling at the AA meetings. But when Jesse meets Andrea and the two start the date, the money slows up a lot on their operation, because the way they set things up after Combo died, they agreed to avoid risk they would only sell at the meetings. But with Jesse struggling to find his work-life balance between Andrea and selling meth, Skinny Pete and Badger would pick up the bulk of the work and even goes back to selling on the streets unknown to Jesse. But with them going out on their own behind Jesse's back, it doesn't take long for trouble to find Badger. And when he's caught selling on Salamanca turf, an example is made out of him when he's beaten and robbed at gunpoint. And when he doesn't give up the name of who his supplier is, without a second thought, Brandon Mayhew is shot and killed in the street where he bleeds out on the pavement, not too dissimilar to Combo. And when the next day rolls around and Jesse can't get a hold of Badger, he becomes increasingly frustrated thinking that he's dodging his calls. But when he gets a visit from Skinny Pete, who looks like he's been crying, he tells Jesse what happened, saying, Badger was killed last night. What? How? Jesse questions in disbelief. Well, when the money wasn't coming in like it was, me and Badger started slinging on the streets again. But last night, he called me to pick him up from the spot downtown, but when I got there was blood and police everywhere. And Jesse puts his hands on his head and starts pacing around the room, completely lost for words. And seeing how hard Jesse is on himself while hearing the news, Skinny Pete speaks up, telling him while handing over the cash and meth, Jesse, this isn't on you. This is on me. So just take what's yours, and I'm gonna get out of here for a while. I'll see you, Jesse. And I'm sorry. And after Skinny Pete leaves, Jesse is left to deal with the many emotions that he's feeling about another one of his friends getting killed. And right as he's about to break his sobriety, he gets a phone call from Walter of all people, who's already seen the news about Badger, and he gives him his condolences saying, I heard about your friend, and I'm sorry about Badger. And Jesse accepts his sympathy, but then he asks, so what do you want? Can you talk? Walter says. Yeah, Jesse responds. I'm outside, Walter says, and the two discuss a partnership where they no longer have to take unnecessary risk. Over in El Paso, Juan Bosa gets word of a snitch being in their ranks, but it doesn't take long to narrow down who it is. And after dealing with Tortuga, he reports the news to Joaquin Salamanca, who's on his way to Gus regarding some accusations about blue meth on his streets. Because just to add some context behind his thought process, he believes that he has the best chemist in Mexico, but with this blue meth being around, which is chemically superior to anything he has, he would hate for someone like Gus to find this cook because it could jeopardize Joaquin's status as Don Eladio's top earner. But little does he know, Gus is not only working with Heisenverse, but he also has everything in place to go out on his own. But he remains secretive about his plans, allowing for Joaquin to believe that he has the best product in the cartel. So while he heads over to meet with Gus, staying in El Paso, Hank Schrader is doing his best to adjust to his new work environment, but he's just having a hard time fitting in. But that all changes when he spots their snitch Tortuga's decapitated head on the back of a turtle, and upon further examination, before anyone could react, the turtle explodes, killing every agent on the scene, including Hank. Joaquin Salamanca arrives at a chicken farm with a few of his own men and a single bucket of Gus's chicken batter with him, and he pulls out a package of blue meth from the bucket before asking Gus, "You want to explain this, Gustavo?" And Gus looks down at the bucket, then back up to meet his gaze, and he explains, Don Salamanca, please allow me to apologize for my secrecy, as I meant no disrespect, but given the purity of this product, my goal was only to confirm a suitable and trustworthy manufacturer before bringing this to you or Don Eladio. And for a moment there's a brief stare down before Joaquin nods, understanding Gus's point of view, then saying, but I thought I said no meetings. When I was introduced to this Heisenverse, I did not know him under this alias. However, our business is only a means to an end. Gus explains in a calm tone, a means to what end? To have my chemist study under him, learn his formula, and once it can be replicated, he'd be no concern to me after that. But just to keep the peace, I can personally bring him to you as a gift for the cartel. I'm sure Don Eladio will be pleased with this offer. Gus says with hopes to resolve the friction between him and the Salamancas, and Joaquin silently accepts the offer before telling Gus, you have 1 week, as he gets up concluding the meeting once more. We pick up with Walter and his family, who's still processing their grief about what happened with Hank, causing him to miss a few days of work and having Jesse run things in his absence under the supervision of Mike. And considering the plan that he's trying to put into motion, with him unable to use Walter at this time, and knowing that him and Jesse are a package deal, he calls on Gail to learn Walter's formula from Jesse, and basically have him be a stand-in for Heisenverse. And Gus figures that based off their first deal, Jesse and Walter's meth is more or less the same, if not equal.
I am told his product was more or less consistent with the quality I'd come to expect.
More or less?
But given that Jesse hasn't been made aware of Gus's men using a kid to kill combo, and likely he never will, he wasn't able to go on those field trips with Mike and prove himself as an asset to the business. So in Gus's eyes, he only sees Jesse as a contemptible junkie who's only a part of this operation because of Walter. But if Gail can learn the formula well enough for even just one cook for the cartel, that's all Gus would need to exact his revenge, and he may not even need Walter and Jesse after that. So for the next few days, Gail learns under Jesse's tutelage how to cook the blue sky meth, and although their learning styles clash at times, Jesse teaches him as well as he could. But for one reason or another, maybe it's just Jesse in general, but Gail's just having a hard time learning from someone like him.
I can't believe this.
This is my replacement. Gail, nice to meet you.
Sir.
So although when inside Gus's lab the purity is upwards of 96%, when Gail eventually makes it over to the cartel's super lab, he disregards some of Jesse's teachings in favor of his own, which would be a fatal mistake because when it's tested, it barely cracks 90% and it's nowhere near the color blue, putting Gus, Gail, Victor, and Tyrus all at risk, and only missing Mike because somebody has to keep an eye on Jesse. So when meeting with Don Eladio, Joaquin gets the disappointing news about this much talked about Heisenverse, who Gus promised that his product would be far superior than what they have currently, which upsets the entirety of the cartel for their time being wasted, and Eladio questions Gus about this substandard cook and product, saying, "Gustavo, you go behind our back to not only waste my time, but embarrass yourself by bringing this garbage to my home?" Eladio says, looking over at Gail, then gesturing to Joaquin before saying like he just had an epiphany, "You know what, Gustavo? This is all starting to feel very familiar." And midway through his sentence, a gunshot goes off, revealing that Joaquin shot Gail in the head nearly identical to the way his Uncle Hector killed Max, leaving visible fear on Gus's face because he knows what this failure means for him. So as the cartel members begin surrounding Victor and Tyrus, Eladio says, looking down at the now bloody pool water, "I told you before, you're not in Chile. And here, we deal with snakes very differently." And the surrounding cartel members quickly overpower both Victor and Tyrus, forcing Gus to stand there helpless as their throats get slit and then drowned in the pool water where Gail's body is. Don Eladio then walks towards the gift that Gus gave him, revealing it to be the Zofiro Añejo tequila, and he smiles. But it's not a smile being impressed with the bottle, but rather laughing to himself at the plans that he has in store for Gus. And with him already distrustful of the chicken man, Eladio wants to confirm a suspicion that he has about this gift of his, and he pours Gus a shot to drink. Then another, and another. And by the fifth shot, he's barely able to stand, now feeling the effects of the poison. And Eladio tells his men to let him go, having Gus drop to the floor, laying in the same spot he was nearly 20 years ago. And while standing over him, Eladio puts his foot down on Gus's neck and he grits his teeth before stomping down in his head, having Gus let out a blood-curdling groan. And Eladio's foot comes down again, and again, and again, until his foot is covered with blood and gore, and Gus's head is nothing more than a bloody puddle dripping into the pool. It's been 4 days since Mike heard anything from Gus, and being his second in command, Gus did have contingencies in place for this exact situation, which includes the liquidation of his businesses to pay off his employees and not allow for there to be any kind of domino effect that can reveal who he actually was to the public and put anyone else at risk. A plan that I'm sure he likely had in place in the original, but I don't think he ever thought in a million years that he would have been killed by Hector Salamanca. So one afternoon, while in the middle of cooking a batch, Mike comes into the lab relieving Walter and Jesse of their duties and saying to them from the top floor, "Gentlemen, going forward your services will no longer be needed. Mr. Fring has already taken the liberty of giving you the remainder of the agreed amount of money, and you should have it by the end of the week." Hold on, Mike, what do you mean no longer needed? I hope you're not saying that Gus is actually going to use Gail going forward. Walter arrogantly questions in response. "Walter, it's none of your business what happens moving forward." Mike says, now glancing over to Jesse before saying, "And do you have any questions?" To which he looks at Walter, then back up at Mike before just shaking his head and saying, "No? Good. Once you finish up here, feel free to leave your keys behind, and we'll be in touch." Mike says getting ready to leave, but Walter demands to know what's going on by saying, "So what, that's it? We're just supposed to leave and never come back?" And Mike turns around and says plainly, "Yes, Walter, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. The agreement you had with Fring was $3 million for 3 months, and seeing how it's only been 2, I don't think you're in any position to complain." And deep down, Walter knows that Mike's right. He shouldn't complain. But the fact that it's not Gus in person telling him this, but rather just one of his cronies, it really takes a blow to his ego, especially considering that he would have thought that Gus would have seen him as an equal. And he looks up to Mike and says, "I want to speak with Gus." "That's not going to happen," Mike says, shutting down Walter before continuing. "The best thing for you to do right now is shut up, finish the batch, and wait for your payday." Mike says, growing annoyed at Walter, and Jesse tries to get him to focus on the positive, saying, "Come on, Mr. White, are you seriously trying to talk yourself out of the easiest money, like, ever?" But Walter ignores Jesse, refusing to even blink from his stare down with Mike, and saying sternly after a few seconds of silence, "I'm not leaving until I speak with Gus." And Mike starts walking closer to the railing with each footstep echoing throughout the lab until he has one arm leaning on it before saying, "The man is dead. Now finish the cook and get the hell out of here." Mike says, walking out the lab with the door slamming behind him and leaving Jesse and Walter in complete shock at the news. But when the alarm goes off on Walter's watch, indicating that it's time to finish the batch, they work on what seems to be their last cook. A few days later, we pick up in Saul's office with Kim and Jimmy in the middle of discussing the latest news of a helicopter crash that killed everyone on board, including Gus Fring, who was one of the passengers, when Mike comes in carrying 2 duffel bags filled with cash. And as Kim is about to leave, Mike tells her, "It's okay, Miss Wexler. I'm not going to be here long." And as he directs his attention towards Saul dropping the bags on the table, he says to him, "This belongs to our mutual associates. Make sure that they get this by the end of the week." "Okay, and any reason why you don't..." "Oh," Saul says, opening the bags and revealing the money. "I'm going out of town for a little over a week, but after that, I'm out, and I'd rather have business on this side of town taken care of by the time I get back." And Saul says jokingly, "Don't worry, Mike, your bidding shall be done." But nobody in the room is laughing, not Mike and not Kim, who at this point knew that Saul was involved in some illegal activities, but seeing it up close makes Kim a little uneasy to be around him. And Mike would say his goodbyes before leaving his office and headed to Texas for one last piece of business. But with her interest piqued, Kim can't help but ask about the money, like who it belongs to, or why it has to be him to be the middleman. Questions to which Saul hesitates on answering, but he tells her, "Okay, so do you remember a couple months back when I brought up this guy, Mayhew, as my new client?" "Yeah, the guy with the son or the nephew, right?" "Exactly. Well, long story short, this guy, Mayhew, well, his name's not Mayhew, it's actually Walter White, and that blue meth that the DEA is so crazy about, well, that's him." Saul explains with his usual charm, and as Kim is processing what she was just told, she grabs her things realizing that she's late for a hearing. But before she leaves, Kim just has one question for Jimmy. "Should I be worried?" "Not in the slightest, trust me, but go, serve justice on a silver platter, Kim. I'll see you tonight." And when she leaves out the office, Saul will grab a phone from his drawer and make a call to both Walter and Jesse for them to get their money. Later on that evening, Mike waits behind the wall of a suburban home holding a pistol with a silencer on it, waiting for Lydia to arrive. Because even though she's done her part as far as taking care of the corporate side of the business per Gustavo's request, Mike knows that it's only a matter of time before Miss Rodart Quell starts to unravel and begins to operate under paranoia. And with him basically acting as a janitor tying up all the loose ends in Gus's operation, he views her as the biggest liability there could be. And side note, but I've always interpreted this scene of Mike viewing Lydia only as a means to an end.
You don't know this woman like I do. I had a chance to deal with this before, and I gave her a pass. It's what I get for being sexist. Now, if you excuse me.
So after killing Lydia and ensuring that her body would never be found, Mike heads back to Albuquerque, no longer as Gus's chief fixer, but now simply as a civilian. And with him free of any tales or investigations from the DEA, he can finally enjoy his retirement knowing that the money he's earned will be there for his granddaughter after he's gone. And for Mike, that's all he's ever wanted. It's been nearly a month since Walter and Jesse stopped cooking, and since receiving their money from Saul, things have been good. Great even. Walter's able to buy the car wash and fix things with Skylar and sell the gambling store to Marie and Walter Jr. And for Jesse, with his love for Andrea and Brock being all that he has, he decided to move them into his house and embrace a life where he doesn't have to cook meth every day. And he also really likes being a dad. But one day, while Andrea and Brock are gone, Walter pays Jesse an unannounced visit to catch up. But really, he's trying to see if he can talk Jesse into cooking again. Because although he has more money than him or his family can ever spend, retirement is just not suiting Walter. So as he tries to exaggerate the importance of their need to cook and grow and expand, Jesse's just not buying it this time. And he tries to let Walter down easy by saying, "I'm sorry, Mr. White, but I'm not coming back. You're welcome to have the RV and cook all the blue you want, but I'm out." "Jesse, you're throwing away your..." Walter says, getting cut off by the door opening and Andrea and Brock walking inside carrying groceries. And Jesse says while taking some bags from Andrea, "Hey, Andrea, I want you to meet my, friend, Walt. It's a pleasure. I was actually just leaving." Walter says, shaking Andrea's hand before glancing down at Brock. But seeing that she's interrupting a conversation that they're in the middle of, she takes Brock into the kitchen, leaving them alone once again. And Jesse tells Walter with his hands in his pockets, "I never had people depend on me before, Mr. White, and I'm not going to let them down." And instead of trying to guilt him into cooking again, Walter stands impressed at Jesse's reasoning. And after seeing his family up close and their joy to see him, while he's on his way out the door, Walter stops and tells him, "I'm proud of you, Jesse. Take care of yourself." And he leaves Jesse's house for the last time, but with a different perspective. And it took Jesse of all people to remind him of what this all has been for. Family. And even though his cancer's still in remission, it doesn't change the fact that any day it could return. And it causes him to think back on Hank's funeral and how many good memories they can recall with him. But when he thinks of his own father's last days and how sad it was for his 6-year-old self, he really starts to think about legacy and the way he wants to be remembered, and it's not with the people he loves most hating him, which would have likely have been the case if he chose to keep cooking with or without Jesse. So as Walter finally returns home, he's greeted by Skylar and Walter Jr. in almost the same fashion Jesse was with Andrea and Brock. And Skylar asks, "Is everything okay, Walt?" And he says while picking up Holly, "Everything is perfect." Picking up at Kim and Jimmy's apartment, things have been a little rocky in their relationship ever since that day in the office. Because even though Kim is a ride or die for Jimmy, what kind of lawyer would she be if she didn't do her due diligence? And she remembers speaking to a Skylar White a few months ago about her drug-dealing husband, and after making the connection that this is the same Walter White that Saul's doing business with, she does more research looking into this Mayhew person. And when finding out that there was actually a Brandon Mayhew that was murdered a few months ago in relation to drugs, and not just any drugs, but this blue sky meth, she begins to question herself about the person that she's married to, and how far into the criminal underworld he's actually slipped without her even noticing. Because the D-Day thing with Howard was fine because they were both in on it and Howard didn't die. But this? Drugs? Murder? And who knows what else that he's not telling her. But these are all things that can affect them both. And with how Kim has built herself up over the past few years with her pro bono practice, she's gained a lot of notoriety in her field that could all be jeopardized if anyone ever found out what was going on with Saul and Walter White. And as she goes back and forth with herself on what she should do, Saul walks into the apartment greeting Kim with a kiss. But when he looks down to see the court documents for Brandon Mayhew, as well as the same WalterWhite.com website pulled up on her laptop, he says, "Hey, what do you got here?" And Kim says, looking up at Saul from the couch, "You should know. So how about we just skip past the part where you lied to protect me and you just tell me the truth. All of it, Jimmy." And as her eyes get watery, she blinks, having the tears roll down her cheeks as she waits for an answer. And Saul gulping the saliva in his mouth is slow to speak because for the amount of dirt that he actually does, Kim doesn't even know the half of it. And if he were to tell her the whole truth right now, he wouldn't even know where to begin. So in the hopes to get her to see where he's coming from, he tells her the same story he did during the finale.
A man came into my office. He said his name was Mayhew.
And as he was explaining himself, obviously he leaves out a few key details, including the money laundering, covering up Jane's overdose, and Badger's murder. And to be fair, he was aware of it, but he had nothing to do with it. That was all the Salamancas. But even after his explanation, Kim is still looking at him with that same look, and he can tell that she doesn't believe him. But instead of forcing the truth out of him, she comes to accept what she has to do. And as the tears continue to stream down her face, she wipes them with the sleeves before saying, "Jimmy, I will always love you. But if you can't even tell me the truth, I'm not even sure that I want to know at this point. Kim, that is the—" "Jimmy, please don't." Kim says, stopping in mid-sentence. "I stood by you while you became Saul Goodman, and I thought after Howard, I mean, the whole reason for us getting married was for you to let me know what was going on. That's all I've ever wanted, Jimmy." And Saul says apologetically, "And I'm telling you right now, Kim, the business that I had with Walter White is finished. He's out. It's done. It's over." Wait, are you saying that you're only done because he is? And what if he decides to start cooking meth again? Then what? Kim questions in frustration. "Kim, the guy's probably got 6 months tops, and besides, I've already let Huel know. He won't even get a consult." Saul says in response. But with every question asked, Kim notices a pattern with Jimmy and how he's not giving direct answers. And with her mind made up, she talks to him in a very similar way to Chuck. "Jimmy, it's clear that this is just who you are, and that's fine. But you can't expect me to be a part of something that you can't even be 100% honest with me about. Kim, please, I told you, it's done. It's over. I'm done with it." Saul says, now on the verge of tears. "And what happens if another drug-dealing murderer comes your way? You're not just going to say no to that. I know you, Jimmy." And Saul, who has a pretty good idea of where this conversation's going, he asks Kim with sadness in his eyes, "So what happens now?" And Kim takes a deep breath before handing the divorce papers over to Saul. "I've been offered a partnership with a firm out in Florida, and I'm going to take it." And while he still looks at the divorce papers, he looks up at Kim no longer with sadness, but rather acceptance. And he says to her, "You give him hell, Kim." And he signs the papers right then and there. Because the love he has for Kim is only rivaled by him being Saul Goodman, and they both know that if it ever came down to him choosing between the two, he'd be unhappy regardless of the decision. And by him signing the divorce papers, they both have an unspoken understanding on why they can't be together. So as Kim goes to finish packing her bags, Saul's phone begins to ring. And after answering, he just says, "I'll be right there," proving to himself that he is Saul Goodman and he will never change. Hey everybody, and thank you so much for watching this video, and I really hope you enjoyed another story from the Heisenverse. And I have to say, putting this story together in this way wasn't exactly easy, but it was so much fun going down the different avenues and figuring out the kind of interactions I wanted to have in this story with it all still making sense. And for the most part, at the end of the day, everybody wins. I mean, for the most part. But that's just me. But now I want to hear from you guys. What did you think of the conclusion of the story? Was it worth the wait? Did it all make sense at the end? Would you have done anything different? Whatever it is, let me know down below in the comments, and I'll do my best to respond. Until then, my name is Murge. Later.